Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of 247 DIY. We're back working on my Craftsman Snowblower setup here, and unfortunately about a week ago I was snowblowing the driveway and I ended up snapping the auger shaft here into two pieces. Luckily enough, they're still available for purchase, so I ordered a new one, and that's what we're going to be going ahead and replacing today. All right, so like I said, the auger shaft for that blower unit is still available for purchase. It's not the original Craftsman part. Most of these older Craftsman type yard equipment type stuff, you can't get the actual original parts, but Agri-Fab is typically still producing most aftermarket units for those, and that's what this was. Not outrageously expensive, it was a little on the higher side. It was about $78 on Amazon. And then that didn't have the standard fast Amazon shipping, so I paid the additional $8 for the fast shipping because I needed this before, I think the standard shipping was about a month. So I needed it quicker than that, so $78 plus another $8 on top is what that cost me. As far as the blower itself, I've actually gone ahead, I took this all apart and I tried my hand at welding that shaft back together, started it up, and it immediately broke again. Mainly because I didn't know why it broke in the first place. I just assumed that I had picked up a piece of ice and then that put enough pressure on there where, in addition to the fact that I didn't realize that when I bought this unit secondhand, the previous owner had used bolts to replace the shear pins. That's obviously what transferred the strain to the auger shaft, and that broke instead of the shear pins. But I was actually just out here the other day, and what I noticed was, let me get you some better light in there. One of the carriage bolts for the adjustable shoe here for the bottom had come loose, and the corner of the auger caught that bolt as it backed out. And that's what snapped the auger shaft. So like I said, I've actually already had this all apart to attempt to fix it. And there's a couple, probably two different ways that you could go about getting the unit out of there so that we can work on it. The way that I went about it is I took the pulley off the back here, because once you disconnect everything in the front, then everything along with the impeller blades and everything can come right out. That did involve taking the whole unit off, so if you're going to do it that way and you've never had that pulley off before, you really need to get in there and get some leverage on it to work that pulley off of the impeller shaft. But now that I've had it off, it's not as stuck on there. I'm hoping I don't have to take the whole unit off and I can just get that pulley back off. The other way that you could probably try to do it is back inside there on the shaft that goes from the front gearbox here to the impeller blades. You can see there's those two set pins in there. You could potentially punch those out and then get that shaft out of there without removing the impeller portion of it, and then therefore not having to take the whole unit off. But it's a pretty cramped area, and those pins have never been out, and I really didn't feel like getting a hammer in there and getting enough leverage to punch those pins out was going to be possible. So I just felt it was probably much less of a headache to go ahead and just remove the pulley on the back. That way everything can come out. So it's really not too complicated. All we have to do is remove the 3 bolts that hold this side end of the auger on, the 3 bolts on this side, and then the 2 bolts on this locating bracket that locate this center gearbox. And then obviously we'll get underneath, we'll undo the belt, and then we will just come back here, we'll undo that center nut off the pulley and get the pulley off of there, and then that whole unit will just come out of the front, and then we can take the 2 bolts out of both auger ends, slide the auger shafts off. Then we do have to split the gearbox so that we can take the locating key out from the gear, the center gear on there. We'll have to transfer the center gear over. So hopefully we can get that gearbox apart without any major headaches, but we won't know that until we get this thing out of here unbolted and apart and take a look at the inside. right, so I figured I'd stop and just do a little bit of an update where we're at now. One thing that I should have thought of and I just completely forgot to think of is obviously there's a grease in here. I thought it was a fluid at first because a lot dripped out, but that may have just been some water that got in over the ears. It definitely seems like it's some sort of grease that needs to be repacked in there, but this particular Auger gearbox is not meant to be serviced. There's no fill or drain plug for like a fluid or anything like that, and that's why they list it as a separate replaceable unit. So I'm going to have to just do a little bit of research and figure out an appropriate grease to go back inside of there. And as far as the shaft is concerned, it's not what I was expecting. The replacement shaft has like a little keyway for a woodruff key in the shaft itself. And I'm not going to really know the answers to that question until we get this broken down a little bit further, but I wasn't expecting this little sort of bushing to be on here. The gear itself keys with a woodruff key right here into the bushing, and then the bushing's on the shaft. If it is press fit and it's not on there with like a keyway or anything like that, we'll work with this end obviously because it's much shorter now that it's snapped, but I'm probably have to grind all the rust scale down off of this as far as getting this off of the shaft, but we'll get it off there one way or another. And it does look like this little bushing here is keyed on there. You can see it there. I have a feeling just with the rust and everything, this thing is probably on there pretty good. So first thing I'm gonna do is work at getting all this rust scale off of here, and then we can work at trying to get this off of the actual shaft. All right, so I also realized kind of while I was cleaning that up and had time to think about it, worst case scenario, if this is really stuck on there, I can probably just cut this shaft right off, bring this over, get it set up in my press, and then press the shaft out of it. But I just wanted to see if maybe I don't have to worry about doing all of that, and I can just get this off of here with a block of wood and a hammer. All right, so we got that sleeve off of there. That was really on there, but luckily the press came through. And then we just have to recycle this woodruff key out of the old shaft here. That was in there pretty good too, but I just kept tapping on the edge of it with a flathead screwdriver. And then eventually just with some light taps, it worked itself up out of there. So we can transfer that over to the new shaft. I'm gonna go ahead and just take a minute off camera to try to get the inside of this bushing here cleaned up so that it's not going to want to bind too much going on in the new shaft. So we'll try to get as much rust scale and corrosion out of there as we can before we swap that over. All right, so I've just gone ahead, I put the woodruff key in there after I cleaned it up. I've put some anti-seize all over this area. God forbid I ever have to take this apart again. Hopefully I never have to, but that hopefully will keep that problem that I had getting that off of there without a whole lot of pressure with that press. Hopefully that'll stop that issue. But now we've got this here, it's ready to go back on. It actually fits a lot looser than I was expecting, but we'll get that on there. And luckily there's kind of like, I can feel it, there's kind of like a rusted spot in there a little bit where it's wanting to grab that woodruff key, which is going to be good because it's going to kind of keep this steady while we reassemble everything. And then I still haven't figured out what type of grease I need to pack everything with, so I'm just going to reassemble the keyway here and then the gear with just some generic grease until I figure out what I need to pack the whole assembly with. All right, so I really couldn't find an exact answer on what grease I need to go with, but I had some of this CRC Molygraph grease. It's a graphite lithium grease. It's a great all-purpose grease for bearings and bushings, ball joints, stuff like that. I think it should be perfectly fine using this application. I didn't want to overpack it, but I also didn't want to underpack it, so I just kind of used my best judgment. I got it in there where the grease was previously. We'll do the same thing to the other half. The only thing that's going to be tricky about this is, one, I'm going to kind of be a little bit lazy and not take the impeller off the end of this shaft when I put it together. And then I also need to get some RTV silicone on here as we put this together and sandwich everything together. So we'll see how that goes. You could just use regular old RTV on this. It was something I didn't think of ahead of time. I've got some ultra copper here. Again, it's RTV. This is just meant for high temp applications, but it's going to work perfectly fine here as well. All right, and then I also went ahead and ordered up some shear pins. You can see the reliefs that are cut into these shear pins, and then that way, should the auger blades catch something again, it creates a weak point, and these pins, which really are just a bolt with the relief cuts in them, they'll break off, and then that'll allow this to spin, and then all you have to do is just replace it with a new one, and that saves wear and tear and from breaking all these more important components than just a bolt that costs you a few cents. So that's gonna go ahead and wrap everything up for this one, guys. With that new auger shaft in there, this thing's as good as new, and I'm gonna be able to continue using it for the rest of the winter. As always, if you like the video, be sure to hit that like button. Feel free to leave a comment below, and if you're not subscribed already, please consider subscribing. Thanks.